Welcome back, Richard. It's good to see you this morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I am doing well.
Okay.
I really like the topic that we're going to cover today because it is a conversation that we have with lots of families, and
Right.
it is sort of part of the root of a lot of issues that we deal with a lot of teens, young adults, and families. And that is this, we're going to talk a little bit more about parenting and about kids, the whole, not really failure to launch per se, but maybe trying to explain that a little bit more today in general.
Right. Yeah, this was interesting articles, several that came across this week. We're all familiar, most of us are familiar with the concept of failure to launch. The idea that by age 18 or 19, so many teens are not ready to leave home or decide what they want to do. And so they just sort of hang around, extend childhood. The problem, however, and what we're going to talk about today, is that idea of immaturity generally, a lack of age-appropriate developmental skills and abilities as we move from childhood to adulthood, this wonderful, this difficult period that we call adolescence, which is a transition from childhood to adulthood. And many teenagers seem to have trouble finishing that transition to adulthood. And what these articles are about is that maybe the problem starts much earlier than that,
Right.
with a general, what one author calls infantilization. It's a term we used to use referring to very young children, like 4 and 5-year-old children who are treated like babies. And we used to refer to it as, well, this child is being infantilized. Well, maybe it stretches across and into the teenage years as well. So
Yeah.
it seems that now that children of all ages are not as mature as previous generations. Very often we even hear ourselves saying, well, when I was your age, I could do this, or when I was your age, I was doing this. And I think I kind of agree with these authors that there's more than a kernel of truth in that. Compared to first of all, our species develops more slowly than most. We all know that. It's called altricial. Hooved animals, deer and bison and horses and cows, they can walk within within an hour or two after birth. It takes our species about a year to learn how to walk. But we also have a lot more to learn. So, for example, like, I don't mean to be gross, but elimination. Most animals can eliminate their waste wherever they want. They just stand and eliminate. We have to learn a social custom along with maturation. So not only do we mature slower biologically, but we have more to contend with. So it takes us a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So,
And I think that it's important to say that, as we're going through some of this stuff and we're talking about immaturity, we certainly, I think when you refer to maturity, sometimes there's these connotations or these sort of social ways in which, oh, you're so immature. We're not really talking about it in that sense. We're talking about some of these developmental milestones and some developmental aspects that, one would expect someone to have attained by different age milestones. And when a person doesn't reach that, we refer to that as immature, developmentally immature, or developmentally delayed. And I think you're absolutely right that, with many other species, their primary development is physical development. If they can walk, if they can run, they can remain safe. If they can eat, they can, that's their primary existence. We have the physical development, and we go through all those same developmental milestones, but we do have that additional social and emotional piece. but we also have as the kid gets older, we have the academic piece.
Right.
And so it's there's so many other aspects that we try to target when it comes to development, that I think that when you're thinking about immaturity, we're talking about many of these other areas, not necessarily just purely survival, but also some of these other areas of development.
Yeah, ours is more complicated. It's more complicated by culture. It's more complicated by what the expectations of academic expectations, social expectations. So our biological maturation takes a little bit longer, but it's also more complicated because we have a more complicated existence than a feral animal, a cow or a horse. So with that in mind, so we do mature more slowly, but even within that slower maturation, we seem to be experiencing some sort of global ubiquitous delay. I call it the Great Delay. For example, by age 5, because if we want to talk about age 18, we can't just say, well, let everything happen, and at age 18, the teenager will leave home, be completely independent. It begins much earlier than that. So by age 5, a child should no longer be having temper tantrums. Talk to any kindergarten teacher. They should be able to clean up their own messes. Talk to any parent. And they should play well with others. So by age 5, you have from birth to 5 to accomplish those things, because the child has to go to school. And when they're in school, they're going to be expected to do all these things. Just a couple of years later, by age 8, children should be able to manage their own possessions, their shoes, their clothes. They should be doing chores on a regular basis. They shouldn't have to be reminded. There shouldn't be any battles. And they should be able to even manage school assignments and school materials on their own. I mean, think about that. By the end of 3rd grade, you should be able to manage your schooling. I mean, other generations have, other people do. And so we have these sort of mile markers at age 5, at age 8. Now, when we get to the teenage years, we're probably capable of much more than we expect of our teenagers. And if you go through history, Alexander the Great controlled most of the known world by the time he was 33. So he used his 20s to do that. Juliet of Romeo and Juliet, she was 13. I mean, we think that they were middle or late teenage. No, Juliet was 13. Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence when he was 26. Daniel Boone was a teenager when he was leading settlers into the frontier. I mean, he was like 16, 17 years old when he was doing that. James Madison was the ambassador to England when he was 23. And you say, well, wait a minute, that was the old days. That was old times, special times. Well, let's go up to World War II. You know those bombers that used to fly into Germany? They would fly from England to Germany during World War II to bomb German cities. The average pilot was 20. They were flying bombers shot at by German fighter planes and returning these planes. So in fact, we send 17, 18, 19-year-olds into battle all the time. We do it in all wars. If older teenagers can handle that, surely they can handle an English assignment.
Absolutely.
And you say, well, that was 2 generations ago. That was my grandfather's generation. Well, today's children, if you were born into an Amish family, by age 15 or 16, you take your place among the adults. If you're a male, you're a craftsman or a farmer, and you do that on your own. If you're a female, you start taking care of a house and children as teenagers. Okay, so if they can, surely our children can. I mean, and we see that throughout history. Okay?
Yeah, I think that, as we get into this next part, something that, I know, Richard, you and I think about this a lot because of our history and experience with working in child development and working with babies and all the way up through adulthood. As individuals develop, what you will see these sort of stair steps where a person will have a particular skill and they'll kind of be there for a little while, and then all of a sudden they'll jump up to the next step, and all of a sudden, they're going from crawling to running. It's like
Right.
that
Mhm.
big jump. But something else that we know is that as a child is developing in one area, many of the other areas remain pretty steady. So if there's a huge jump in physical developmental milestones, for example, you might see a stagnation almost in communication. They
Right.
don't
Right.
gain up, they're not gaining as many words as they are at the same time that they're, gaining all these physical skills. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden the physical skills will kind of hold steady for a while. And then there's a burst in communication skills.
Right.
So when you think about all of these different areas of development, and again, remember, as we said earlier, that as humans, we have many other areas of development that we're trying to accomplish as compared to our other species and stuff. As we're working on some of these other areas of development, we may see some stagnation or some delays in the development of other
Right.
developmental areas.
Mhm.
So thinking about that, let's look at when we think about teenagers, we want them to be able to make decisions, adult-like decisions, and to be able to manage their life really by the time they're 16. I mean, you're going to give them the keys and put them behind the wheel of a moving vehicle that can go pretty fast and
Mhm.
do a lot of damage. And they have to be responsible enough to be able to manage what could be a deadly weapon, right?
That's right. Yeah, because we think in terms of 18. Well, the child has to be matured by 18. No, no. I think we should shoot for 16 because at 16, most kids, whether they're driving or not, and by age 16, they should be able to make adult decisions because they're going to have adult responsibilities. When you get behind the wheel of a car, you now have adult responsibilities,
Right.
and they have to be able to manage their own lives. If a car, the problem is, I think, is that many of us view a car as an extension of childhood rather than an introduction to adulthood.
Right.
Let's get our 16-year-old a car so she can be more mobile, or she can be this, or she can be that. No, no. This is the beginning of adulthood. You now are assuming, because you have the capacity to do some serious damage, to make some very serious consequential mistakes.
Right.
So I see a car as not as an extension of your childhood. I see it as the introduction to adulthood. Okay.
Right. And all the while that this is happening, we're expecting them to gain these skills and to gain this
Right.
independence and responsibility and all that. Our focus, if we think about the area
Right.
of development that we're typically focusing on, is
Mhm.
academics.
Right.
We want them to make all A's. This is our goal as their parents. We want them to make
Right.
all A's. We want them to be able to go to a big, a good college. We
Right.
want them to, socially, we want them to be popular and some of those kinds of things. And so while they're maybe building some of these academic skills,
Mhm.
remember, as you're growing significantly in one area of development, other areas of development may remain somewhat stagnant and not change as much. And so while they're building those skills, these other skills of social emotional types of things, or again, taking some responsibility, building
Right.
their own sense of self-worth, their own sense
Mhm.
of self-confidence, a lot of those areas of development are not progressing the way that they should.
That's right. If you're a parent, what is your objective? If, we have many parents who come in here and they'll say, well, her job is just to go to school. That's all she has to do. Oh, bad decision. You can't just, what do you want your child to become? If you want your child to be a mature adult by age 18, then you have to do all of those things that give that child the opportunity to become a mature adult by age 16 or 17 or 18. If all you concentrate on is getting all A's, or I just want my child to be obedient, I just don't want my child to do drugs, I just don't want my child to, I want my child to go to a big D1 school. In Florida, the goal of many parents is to get their children into the University of Florida. That's the big objective, so everything they do is to get their child to the University of Florida. Well, and you're right, Bernie, if you're focusing on one part of their development, then you're ignoring all these other things. And it doesn't happen automatically. It doesn't happen biologically. Becoming an adult is not like learning how to walk. Learning how to walk is a biological process.
Right.
Learning how to become an adult is a social learning process. Okay.
Right. Because of
So
how we define adulthood. You know,
that's right.
if we just allowed ourselves to develop, in a society sort of like our primitive ancestors did, it would be
Mhm.
very different because it wouldn't be academic based. There wouldn't be cars that you're driving. There wouldn't be some of these, there would be no expectation that you're going to leave the tribe. You're going to stay
Mhm.
in the tribe and you're going to be here for the rest of your life because that's how we build our tribe and strengthen our tribe. Now we want our kids to leave and to go and to find success and to, have their own lives. It's a very different level of expectation than we had before. And so we can't, just expect it to happen spontaneously.
Right. That's right. It's not going to happen automatically. You have to prepare your children. You have to do all you can to prepare your children to become adults. Now, as we were preparing this, we found this wonderful article called "America Has a Terrifying Infantilization Problem That No One is Talking About." And we posted it in the show notes. And this author makes several interesting points. And why did this happen? Why are we infantilizing our children and teenagers? Well, one is parents are afraid.
Yeah.
Okay. We're afraid to let go. We want to protect. There's this natural tendency that we want to protect our children from harm. But you have to let go. Our children need to learn by doing, not by being told.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Richard, I think that's so important because I'm sure that you've talked to parents about this too, but if you if you if you continue to express fear and
Mhm.
anxiety and
Right.
worry about your child's success, what your
Mhm.
child is going to learn is that success is not maybe not realistic. Success is really difficult. Success isn't guaranteed. And while yes, we have to have some awareness of that, the more that you're saying you can't do these things on your own, the more your kid's going to believe I can't do this on my own. I
Right.
can't.
Right.
I was talking to a teenager, or actually he wasn't even a teenager, he's early 20s. And we were kind of comparing some things just kind of in our chit chat. And well, by this age, I was a stepfather, and by this age, I was working a couple of jobs and I was doing this, and man, yeah, those were difficult days. And I became a stepfather when I was 18 years old, and he's 22 and says, oh my gosh, there's no way I'd be ready for something like that. It's like, well,
Mhm.
if you had asked me at 18, there was no way that I would say there's no way that I was ready for that. But you just did it. And so I
Yeah.
I think that we instill within our kids sometimes this anxiety that, oh, you're not ready for that. Oh no, we're not going to let you get your driver's license now because you're just not ready for that responsibility.
Right.
And kids do internalize that, and they say, you know what, you're right, I'm not ready.
Right.
Because the kids will come in and teenagers will come in and they'll echo exactly what their parents say.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we see that day in and day out here in the
Right.
office.
Yeah. So the first thing, don't be afraid. I mean, look, we're all afraid when our kids leave the house. When I handed my kids the keys to the car, I was scared to death, and I
Sure.
didn't rest until they got back. Okay. But I can't tell them that. I can't give that fear to them. They can't know that I have that kind of fear.
Right.
You have to let go. So one is don't be afraid, or be afraid, but don't let it get in the way of your kids growing up. Second, all parents want to assist their children, okay? Um, we want to smooth the way for our kids. I had a parents come in and say, well, I made these mistakes when I was a teenager, and I can save my children from making those same mistakes. No, you can't.
Right.
Your children must make their mistakes, and the only way they can do that is if you get out of the way and stop trying to assist them at every stage of development. The
Right.
transition from childhood to adulthood is a time when you have to make some mistakes, and you have to allow your children to make their mistakes. Okay, that's
And
your job. Step back.
absolutely. And recognize that assisting them is different than doing it for them.
Exactly. Right.
And you know, sometimes the best way to assist them is to let them do it and realize what works and what doesn't work, and then having a conversation about it and say, okay, well, let's try something different next time, you know, and let them explore that and understand that.
Right.
You can't, doing it for them isn't helping,
Right.
isn't assisting them, it's just doing it for them.
That's right. You can't do it for them. You have to be there when they make the mistakes. That's why you do this during the teenage years, because you're still there to help pick up the pieces.
Right.
It's natural. The third thing is parents want to rescue. They want to protect their children from consequences. Bad idea.
Right.
The earlier your child experiences real consequences, the better off that person's going to be.
Right.
I would like for all this to happen in the first 2 or 3 years of elementary school. Experience some consequences, some failures, some disappointments, because you learn how to manage them early. Do
Right.
not rescue your children from consequences, whether they're right or not. Don't do it. It's a bad idea. No matter how you coach, no matter how you clothe this thing, do not rescue your children from consequences.
Right.
And
And that
then
goes with the next one too.
yeah, don't remove the risk.
Right. You gotta let the risks be there, because that's how they're going to recognize that there's a risk.
That's right.
Again, parents don't understand sometimes that if you protect them from all of the risk when there comes a time that you're not there to remove the risk, the kid is going to have no idea that it's a risk.
Right, right. That's right.
Like, oh, that's just what happens. And so they're going to go out and then they're not going to be equipped to how to deal with it, because they haven't ever had to experience it before. And they're just going to walk, you know, head first right into it, because they don't even know that it's a risk.
Right. That's right. And then the last thing is, don't accept incompetence. Very often, children, and especially male children,
Mm-hmm.
weaponize their incompetence. They, well, I can't, even young children say, I can't do that. No, a 5-year-old is perfectly capable of cleaning up her own messes. Okay. So don't buy this I can't do it business. That's called weaponized incompetence. And very often men do that. They say, well, I don't know how to clean. I don't know how to do this. I don't know. And the partner, and it's not just men, but a partner will pick up the slack.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do it. I'll do it. And then the person who's acting like they can't do anything is able to get away, to stay on the sofa playing video games while the partner is doing the laundry and doing the cleaning and doing the cooking. So don't buy incompetence. That's don't accept that.
Absolutely. Now there was another article that we read, and this was it's another article that's written in response to that book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. We've talked about that book a couple of times here on the podcast, and responses to that book a couple of times on the podcast. But this was a really interesting article that was written by a woman who, talks about what she would do differently now that she has read that book, some things that she would do differently as a parent. Again, the goal of sort of building some of this competence and some of this independence in her kids, some things that she would do differently. And the first thing is to encourage independence. And do so earlier than she did before.
Yeah, we talked about Haidt's book many times, and it's kind of unfortunate, because what got all the attention was that cell phones are causing mental illness in teenagers. That's a side issue in this book. There's a lot of really good information in this book of helping children to assume responsibility, let them, all the stuff that we preach is really in this book. And so it's a treasure trove of I think good parenting advice. And this parent is saying that. She's saying, well, if I had to do it over again, these are some changes that I would make. And I can tell you that if I had to do it again, I would probably make some of these same changes
Yeah.
in the way I raise my children. And the first one is encourage independence a little sooner than I did. Let them experience, let them learn how to solve their own problems. Don't do everything for them. Yes, of course you can do everything for them, but they learn nothing from that. Okay.
Absolutely. The
Um,
second thing is what we've talked about so many times here is limiting screen time,
right.
and trying to do so, as she said, without losing her
I
mind.
love that. I love
Yeah,
that addition,
yeah,
without losing my mind, which means screaming at them and throwing phones on the floor and hitting them with hammers and things.
yeah. Because the reality is that it is super convenient when you're walking around a store or when you need to prepare dinner or something. It's super easy to give your kid a screen,
Right.
especially your young child, give them a screen and let them just be on their iPad or whatever while you're getting things done because they stay quiet, they stay engaged and things like that. But where does that go? What does that lead to? And yeah, limiting screen time, giving them other non-screen activity things to do and making sure that they know what they can do when they don't have a screen in front of them.
That's right. And so what you have to do as a parent is you have to structure, you have to engineer non-screen activities that
Right.
they can do. But this is related to the third thing that she says, which is prioritizing free play. And the idea with free play is not that they're just not overscheduled, but that they are allowed to be bored. And I really like that. I don't care if you're bored. If you're bored, that's not my problem. I am not the cruise social director of the cruise. If you're bored, that is your problem to solve. And I absolutely agree with her.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as the parent, that sometimes means that you have to make sure that they have the
They,
availability of things to do.
right.
You
Hmm.
can't say, well, you can't be on your screen, but you have to, but you can't stay in your room, and you have to be in the living room where there's nothing except a TV that you're not allowed to watch. Sometimes parents limit things like that,
Right.
and it's like, my goodness, like, what do you want them to do then?
Right.
Because I'm sorry, but your 6-year-old isn't going to pick up the encyclopedia to start reading it. It's got to be there's got to be some other activities and things for them to do, some a menu of opportunities for them
Hmm.
to choose from. They
Right.
can choose on their own if they want to do Legos or if they want to play with their cars, but
Hmm.
those things have to be present for them to be able to choose.
Yeah, my son and daughter-in-law, they have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and they have converted their dining room into sort of an activity center, like art room. And that room is filled with pens and paper and pencils, and there are shelves for stuff. Those kids can go in there and entertain themselves for hours because the room is structured that way. It's not a sterile dining room. It's been turned into a sort of an art activity center.
Yeah.
So yes, as a parent, you have to you have to create environments where kids can find things to do. Okay.
Yeah.
Number 4, modeling resilience. Go ahead and let your kids know that you struggle too.
I think that's so important. I
Right.
think it's so important just to say, you know what, I'm really having a hard time with this. I'm going to take a break and I'm going to go work on something else and come back to this later. Man,
Or
for a kid to hear that, it can be so powerful in modeling for them exactly how you want them to respond to frustration.
yeah, or to say, look, I'm having a really bad day today. I'm gonna do that. So let's just go to the park, or let's just go out and get some ice cream. You're teaching your children that you're going to encounter these difficulties, and here's some ways to deal with them. And they
Right.
have to see you do that. Okay.
Right.
It's okay that they see you crying. Explain to them, yes, I'm having a very bad day today. So I am going to do this
Right.
to make myself feel better. So you're teaching them how to deal with their struggles.
Absolutely.
And
The
the
last
last
thing
is,
is so
mhm,
good also is that it's fostering a growth mindset. We focus so much on perfectionism.
mhm.
We focus so much. My God, I cannot stand the idea. I'm getting more and more frustrated with the idea of straight A's because
I
it's
think
like,
we should outlaw straight A's.
oh my gosh, and I get it from the parents' perspective that well, if they don't have straight A's, then they're not going to, getting into University of Florida or Florida State or
Right.
wherever they're going to go. They need to have the best GPA possible because they're going to be competing against really high ranking students and blah, blah, blah. However, I mean, the idea of straight A's is ridiculous
Right.
because it means that your child is near perfect in every area, learning stuff that they've never learned before, being asked to do things that they probably never have done before. But the expectation is that you're going to make an A in there, that you're going to make a perfect score in there. That it's not. That's it just seems craziness to me.
Right. I agree. I think this whole idea of being perfect, by perfect, we don't mean perfect, we mean getting all A's or
Yeah.
being the best soccer player or being the
Right.
best baseball player. Forget about that stuff, okay? Forget about engineering success, this constant need to get everything right, turning in every assignment, getting it always getting every assignment right, getting an A in every class. Do not do that to your children. We want to move toward a growth mindset, what Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset, where your child encounters challenges, learns how to deal with them, learns how to manage consequences, learns how to manage disappointment. That's how you become an adult. You don't become an adult by success, 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 success. You have to have these other things, these other challenges in order to learn how to manage disappointment, failure, um, overcoming obstacles, learning things that are really difficult. When we had when you and I taught in universities, we would get these incoming graduate students, and they would say, I'm going to get a 4.0. I'm going to get all A's in graduate school. And their objective was to get A's, not to learn the material.
Right.
It wasn't a learning objective. It was a performance objective.
Right.
And I said at one point, I think every incoming graduate student should get a B or two the first semester, so that then they don't have to worry about getting all A's and they can turn their attention to learning stuff rather than getting all A's.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that, you know, and there is a sort of a caveat to it that, if you do have a student who is so personally driven and they are studying, they're spending a couple of hours every night, as long as they're doing some other things to grow some of those other areas of development that we've talked about, that's good. But if they're really focused and they are really studious and hitting the books and really working hard, yes, I understand that those students are going to make straight A's.
Right.
But that is student driven straight A's. That's not parent driven straight A's. There's a big difference there. We're talking really about the parents' goals, and
Right.
what that is. So, but those are two different things. And again, in that situation, we're talking about an adolescent who is thinking about his or her future, is thinking about his or her, path that they're working towards. And that is a growth mindset, even though it is focused on, maybe making straight A's or whatever. They're focusing on, I'm going to learn this stuff to get better so that I can be ready for the next thing that's coming.
Yeah, and think about the vocabulary that we use. You have a 12-year-old child, 11 or 12-year-old child. It is going to require growth to get to be an 18, 19, 20-year-old adult.
Right.
So you almost by definition have to have a growth mindset
Right.
if you expect growth to occur across domains.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think that is about it for today. We absolutely will be talking about this more and more over the years and over the days and weeks of the podcast that we're doing here, because my goodness, we talk about it with parents every day. So,
Right.
All right. So that is it for today. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.